be held accountable. I don't understand how there's not some legal ramifications of abandoning the children.
The teachers' unions have given them legal protection, legal cover. They've got extraordinary public authority. They used to have the respect of the public. I think it's shattered. I believe public education is at an inflection point because they have been exposed as being all about themselves, not about the teachers who are in the classrooms. They're not about the parents. They're certainly not about the students. They're all about the bureaucrats who run those unions. And I think most of America is disgusted that schools are closed. And you're right, Pat. If you didn't show up for work, you'd have been fired a long time ago. I thank you for doing so. Have you gotten sick? Have you gotten the vaccine?
I did have COVID, and I did get the vaccine, and I survived. So it's not fun to have it, but you get through it.
Pat, thank you for that and for the encouragement. And also you recommend as a healthcare professional, everyone go and get the vaccine?
Yes, it most definitely.
I know I've run into a few people who are, I don't know, I read on the internet and I think to myself, I have not met a serious healthcare provider yet who says do not get the vaccine as soon as you can. Pat, thank you. Let me go down to Dallas and talk to Roy. Hi, Roy.
Yes, sir. Good morning. Thank you for taking my call.
You're welcome.
You referred to the $300 payout to parents per child.
Per month.
Sir?
It's $300 per month per child if they're under 6, $250 per month per child if they're over 6.
Correct. And I view it as those liberal, progressive Democratic Party members and politicians who promote and want to continue to advocate advancing their messaging and agenda to fund Planned Parenthood and abortions in many states, they would cringe and go absolutely haywire.
Well, wait, it's their proposal, Roy.
I understand, but aren't they going against their grain?
It seems like that to me, but I'm willing to go with them. It's the one smart thing that they've been in favor of. That's why I'm telling Republicans they should be in favor of the child tax credit. It's the only pro-family thing Democrats have done in 100 years.
Well, then they couldn't have their cake and eat it, too, at the same time to fund Planned Parenthood and abortion. Would you agree?
Well, they're going to get rid of the Hyde Amendment. That's an unfortunate consequence of Republicans not voting in Georgia. The Hyde Amendment will be gone. But elections have consequences. If Republicans stay home and don't vote because of lunatic conspiracy theories, they lost the Senate. Maybe they'll get, by the way, I think we're going to win the House and the Senate back in 2022 because they see in real time what teachers are doing to kids. I got to move on. Roy, thank you, friend. Spencer in Texas. Go ahead, Spencer.
Yeah, Hugh, it's an honor and privilege to speak to you.
Thank you.
Instead of printing trillions of dollars and creating inflation, why don't we just let taxpayers keep their own money?
Well, I'll tell you, Spencer, that's what I would do. But I am just a realist. I don't live in an alternative reality. The Democrats are going to spend $1.9 trillion because Joe Biden said he was going to spend $1.9 trillion. He wants to spend twice as much as President Obama did. That's his history. That's his marker. So it's going to happen.
And that's a shame.
It's a shame, but it's going to happen. So let's make sure it actually happens in the best way possible. If they're going to waste money, let's waste money in the best way possible, within their realm of reality.
Hey, I was listening to him on the radio yesterday, and he was talking about children going to bed hungry, and he's the guy that, with a stroke of a pen, killed 70,000 jobs.
Right, he did. It's not coherent, but I do know they're going to spend $1.9 trillion. So Republicans need to focus on what they're going to do and make it better as much as they can. Thank you, Spencer. Bob in Texas. Hi, Bob. You're on the Hugh Hewitt Show. 1-800-520-1234, America.
Morning, Hugh. I'm a high school teacher here in Texas. I teach a high school engineering program. Our district is hybrid. Some kids virtual, some kids live, although my engineering program, being a tech program, it requires lab. They're actually required, even if they declare virtual, to be here 80% of the time live to do their lab work. And in saying that, also let me just make some context. I think you age-wise have me by 6 days. I just became Medicare eligible this month.
There you go.
And and I try to keep myself in shape. I might bicycle 100 miles a month. I don't run like you do, but I just say that because I feel that any teacher that puts their welfare above their students, shame, shame, shame upon them. And I feel that we need to put students first. We need to be willing to put ourselves possibly at risk for the sake of our students.
God bless you, Bob. You know, I think most teachers believe like you do, but their unions don't. And in Texas and in Florida, there are schools, and even in some California districts that have gone back. This Chicago deal that doesn't make them reopen the schools, that's what's got me angry this morning. And you, sir, are a hero, and I appreciate your calling. More calls coming up, America, on the third hour of today's Hugh Hewitt Show.
This is Albert Mohler for townhall.com. The American experiment is founded upon a presupposition, a prior commitment to an ordered liberty, an established order. That means policies. It means a covenant. In our case, it means a constitution. As of right now, the U.S. Constitution is the longest surviving written constitution in human history. It's a remarkable document. All of that came to the fore in violent events that interrupted the joint session of Congress to count the votes of the Electoral College. At the end of the day, our constitutional order proved itself once again resilient. But that doesn't take away any of the tragedy and the horror of what took place. It was an enormous stress test on ordered liberty, a stress test brought on by the President of the United States.
We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved.
It's an opportunity for the right, the left, conservatives, liberals, all Americans to repudiate political violence and reaffirm, once again, our commitment to ordered liberty. It's the American way. I'm Albert Mohler.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
I think the Lincoln Project is specifically a smear campaign to break down what we might call Trumpism, I think could be better called MAGA, Make America Great Again. If you want to, I know it's your show, so if you want to call it America First, I suppose
MAGA's
that's okay
fine.
too.
MAGA's fine.
MAGA, I think, is probably most appropriate though, which is this kind of not nationalistic but nationistic idea that people should be able to have nations that are sovereign, not subject to supranational entities. It's not like rah, 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 USA, USA, although if people want to feel that way about their country, more power to them. But that's not the point. Poland should be able to be Poland, France should be able to be France, the UK should be able to be the UK, and so on. And that it's a broader philosophy in that regard, and that we should, in fact, pursue our own national interests as each individual nation, which is really what MAGA, when applied to the MAGA, is that applied to the American context. Yeah. And so these guys are smear artists who are attempting to destroy and discredit that because they are making money and their people are making money hand over fist from the same foreign wars and the same garbage that people turn to Trump to get away from. And I say that being, I was horrified in 2016 by Trump. I was utterly against him. I had Trump derangement syndrome like everybody else, or half of everybody else, I guess. And now it's like much more clear to me what was actually going on and what's going on now.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
I didn't know when he was playing for the Mets that Gary Carter was a Christian. And I always feel like the media is so secular that they don't know. They just kind of shy away from this.
And Gary Carter was a phenomenal person. We admired him, but we didn't understand him because his ability to play baseball was great. But also at the same time, he was so happy. His joy was so real. And we all wanted that, but everybody thought he was, they thought he was fake, but he wasn't fake. Gary Carter was a Christian from the age of 20 all the way into his whole entire career and his life being out of the big leagues. So he lived a completely different life. Yeah, he was very successful, Hall of Fame, but at the same time, he lived a life for the Lord, and he was a prime example. Him and Mookie Wilson, two guys on our team that were prime example of what a godly man looked like, what a man looks like without a uniform on. And I think that represents more than anything than having a uniform on and maybe struggling and going through some hard times, from a professional standpoint. But from a spiritual standpoint, they didn't have to go through that process in their life when they were playing. And I wish I could have experienced that. I had to experience so many downfalls and pitfalls, through my career. And I was multi-talented. I could play, but I couldn't live. But today, I look at God and I thank God for his grace, the grace that I didn't deserve. That's 2 Corinthians 12:19. He says, my grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. And in my weakness, his grace was sufficient for me, and it allowed me to be the man I am today in Christ.
Ways of contact.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Okay, stand by.
The left always does this. Always. This is part of their textbook policy. They make rules that ruin things, and then they pass laws to deal with the ruination that they brought about. It is classic. You know why the Republicans opposed this 1.8 or so trillion? The primary reason is it's going to state governments. They're bailing out the Democrats who ran profoundly irresponsible operations in spending money that they didn't have. So there's no consequence. That's the key. There's no consequence to Democratic malfeasance. There you go. We'll bail you out. We'll print more monopoly money. Wow, it's really something. The whole thing is really something, the time that we are in now. Right. Let's go to Cynthia in Palos Park, Illinois. Hello.
Hi, Dennis. How are you this morning?
I'm well, thank you.
I'm calling because I wanted to tell you that my friend Karen, my best friend, and I are planning on going with you on the Stand with Israel tour. And my reason for going is I'm feeling very, very unsettled in my life right now with what's going on to my beloved country. And I want to go to Israel to find some peace and some wisdom. And I'm wondering how many others that listen to your show are feeling the way I'm feeling, this loss of optimism with.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Lon Chen of the Hoover Institution for townhall.com. The Biden administration announced in their first week that the U.S. is rejoining the World Health Organization. But the WHO is a flawed group, one that has performed poorly while the world has struggled with COVID-19. Early on, the group was far too deferential to China, even parroting Beijing's early claim that the virus could not be transmitted between humans. Since then, an independent panel concluded that the WHO dithered in its response, waiting too long to declare an international emergency. All the while, the WHO has continued to block Taiwan's participation because of political objections from the Chinese government, despite the fact that the world has much to learn from Taiwan's exceptional response to the virus. Before rejoining the WHO, we should have demanded some accountability and reform from the group for the $400 million in taxpayer dollars we send to it each year. It looks like we'll keep on writing blank checks to the WHO, which they are more than happy to keep cashing. I'm Lon Chen.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
You notice the figure 1.9 trillion just kind of rolls off the tongue. Now keep in mind, this is the administration that said they wanted to unify the country. There had to be healing. There's going to be bipartisanship. And it was all horsepoop. And did the same thing that the Obama administration did. The Obama administration came in. Remember all their health care plans? And the Republicans, Ryan wanted to meet him halfway and had all sorts of ideas. And Obama says, dude, we won the election, you lost. So we ran on Obamacare and
Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi. Candidate Hugh Hewitt with my 400 affiliates. I am pleased to welcome you to a discussion of the most dangerous bill in Congress. Bobby Charles is with the Association of Mature American Citizens, AMAC, longtime sponsor of the Hugh Hewitt Show. And Bobby worked for Ed Meese as I did, so he's a favorite of mine, also Assistant Secretary of State under a couple of Secretaries of State, now with AMAC, and he's studying SR1. And I want you to know what's in SR1 because it doesn't have a prayer of passing, but we got to keep it that way. Good morning, Bobby. How are you?
Good morning, Hugh. It's always a pleasure to be on.
Thank you. Now, give us the rundown. First of all, tell us what the Democrats want to do, and then tell us why it's not going to happen and why we should be happy about that.
Well, I hope the second point is true, but let me start with the first one. I think most Americans are focused on things like impeachment, and they're unaware of the ups and downs. I spent 5 years running a congressional committee that go on behind the curtain. And one of the things that we're experiencing here is a hard push, to maximize the value to Democrats of their very thin majority with the vice president. So H.R. 1, which has been introduced in prior cycles and really, as you say, didn't have a chance in the Senate, really may have a chance now. And here's why it's so damaging. There are really four elements to this bill that most Americans have no idea is out there. The first is that it pulls the entire process of election reform up to the federal level. So what has historically been a constitutionally vested process at the state level becomes really, through federal preemption, this is their idea, a way to insist that all states accept about 10 provisions that they currently resist. A lot of the states, in particular red states, but all states really, a lot of them have this prerogative. They literally, this is a statute that would federally ban voter ID at the polls. It would create same-day and online registration, which we know creates problems for verification and opens the door to fraud. It would essentially create a one-party FEC control, which has never existed. It's always been equally balanced. It would mandate early voting. It would mandate DMV auto registration, which we know, of course, with illegal immigration creates a problem. It would mandate a reopening of the idea of felony voting, 16-year-old registration. It would allow voters to vote outside their precinct without validation. It would keep ineligible voters on the rolls, et cetera. So on the election procedure front, it does two things. One is fundamental, which it brings it to the federal level. Again, a huge change. And the second is that it really mandates that all states accept elements that we have seen, sadly, in the most recent election cycle, at least open the door to huge controversy and probably open the door to fraud. It also, quite honestly, it does three other things that are very distressing. One is that it undermines free speech during an election cycle. So everybody knows, who listens to your show or pays attention on a regular basis, that we're in a strange era of First Amendment free speech suppression. We're witnessing things that we haven't. As an attorney and a former litigator, I've never seen this kind of discussion before, where you can, it's sort of permissive doxing and canceling and chilling and intimidation. Ranging broadly, but particularly significant during the election cycle. And so what does this bill do? It sort of jives with the idea that Twitter has, that you can pull information off and push people off if they say the wrong thing. And so what it does is it literally mandates that organizations disgorge the name of their contributors, the addresses of those contributors. It regulates speech on political issues. It regulates speech on legislative issues. And then the other two things it does that I think are just shocking is that it basically eviscerates the right of states to draw their own congressional district lines, taking that power away from the states and giving it to so-called independent commissions at the federally sort of mandated. But, and then the last thing, of course, that it does is that it mandates that we all pay for campaigns, that it's a public, basically this quote-unquote My Voice voucher gives a 6-to-1 match to candidates, so you can be watching an ad on television that you funded that you totally disagree with.
So, Bobby, it is a Pandora's box. It's a little shop of horrors.
Yeah.
But it's also unconstitutional on a half dozen fronts. And I've never thought it had I know it's H.R. 1. I erroneously called it S.R. 1 earlier. It's H.R. 1. Nancy Pelosi loves to raise money with it. It's a sucker's job. Only suckers give money to get H.R. 1 passed because it's so unconstitutional on so many levels. But AMAC is a pretty serious organization, and the Association of Mature American Citizens spend their time on serious stuff. Manchin has said he will not repeal the filibuster. Sinema has said she will not repeal the filibuster. So H.R. 1 is not going to get 60 votes. I mean, it's an extinction act among Republicans, and even some conservative Democrats must recoil in horror at many of its unconstitutional provisions. What has AMAC worried about it?
Yep. So the reason that I think the entire sort of team that has studied this is deeply concerned is that we're seeing this House and Senate Democrat caucus push harder than we've ever seen. Look how long it took for McConnell and Schumer to come to an agreement not to eliminate the filibuster. There is, I think, a very well-informed cadre of serious constitutional lawyers who believe not only that this is unconstitutional, but there may well be a return to a serious discussion about eliminating the filibuster. You know, many people think that at the end of this cycle, this particular session, that they will push to eliminate the filibuster, and that is really the concern. You know, democracy leaks away like water from a bucket, as we all know, and you're an expert at this, Hugh. But I mean, we know this, and yet unconstitutional statutes find their way into law all the time, and it is not. They then have to be challenged, and if they are found unconstitutional, God willing, that they're turned out. But that doesn't always happen, and I think
Bobby, one of my arguments to people like you is that. Isn't it a good idea to let some of the bad stuff through with this Supreme Court, clearly a 6-3 conservative Supreme Court? It came up with Citizens United. Chief Justice Roberts wrote the concurrence, which talks about when they'll overturn stuff. I actually believe independent redistricting commissions are standing alone unconstitutional, and we may see that revisited because the Constitution explicitly gives it to the legislatures to do that job. So what do you think is the likelihood that maybe some of it gets through and it gets struck down?
Yeah, sure. I'd love for the pass to bounce off the pass receiver's hands and get caught by another guy on the team. I hope that happens. But, this is one where the American Civil Liberties Union, the Wall Street Journal, everybody is worried about this. It's not just AMAC. And AMAC is a voice for conservatives over the age of 50, and you have been brilliant at putting that voice out. But I think my concern is that we're watching people push the envelope here. There are a lot of people that think that this statute could sneak its way out of the Senate. And on the one hand, sure, provisions would get struck down, I would hope, by the Supreme Court if they accepted cert. As we all know, I clerked on the Ninth Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals for a Reagan appointee. It's hard.
Oh, who did you clerk for, Bobby?
I clerked for Judge Beezer at a time.
Oh, sure.
He actually was on the court.
And what year did you do that? I was on the D.C. Circuit 83 to 84. You're younger than I am.
I'm a little bit younger, 87. So I was 87, 88. But actually, it was a wonderful experience. But one of the things, it's probably the best cases I ever saw in my life. But the thing that I think comes hurtling back at me is you want to eliminate as many chances for bad things to happen as possible. And I think the reason AMAC is vocal on this, and really thoughtfully vocal, is that this has a chance for the first time in several sessions of actually seeing the light of day. It also could get amended on the floor, and on the House they wanted to stick some crazy amendments on it. Could it get out? I think it could. Will it get out? I think if we oppose it, it won't. And you have folks on both sides of the aisle saying this is not a good idea, as they're saying don't eliminate the filibuster. But, I didn't think the filibuster would go away on other provisions. I have a firm belief in Jimmy Stewart's position on the filibuster. But the sad thing is we've watched things happen that shouldn't have happened, and then it's about whether somebody catches it behind you. And, the circuits are quirky and disagree with each other, and we all know that. And the Supreme Court has a very narrow window of cases they can accept for cert. So my concern is that this is a serious danger if we don't focus on it and inform the American people that their rights, in particular, their election process rights at the state level and their First Amendment rights, not to mention, as you say, the congressional district line rights, are all really in the crosshairs.
So AMAC is doing this. Is it just you? We got a minute left, Bobby. Is it just you?
We're all. AMAC is a national organization, as you know. We speak out on constitutional issues as well as those that affect older Americans. And the bottom line is they're strong defenders of the First Amendment, and that's probably the biggest trigger here. They're for, free speech, freedom of worship, freedom of assembly for grievance. They're strong supporters of the Second Amendment, the Fourth, the Sixth, the Ninth. And so the Constitution is where I tend to speak out more. We frankly are also strong advocates, of course, for reform of Social Security, federal solvency, all those things that traditional Reagan Republicans have historically believed. And I think one of the ways I look at this is that my time and their connections are very strong to the Reagan administration, and there are many ways a legacy of the Reagan philosophy.
So head over to amac.net, find Bobby's complete speech there,
.us.
find a rundown on amac.us, amac.us. Bobby Charles's complete presentation on H.R. 1 is there, amac.us. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
We've got to open up our schools. We've got to let our kids get an education again. Lori Lightfoot, furious, it seems, with the Chicago Teachers Union. So listen to Trey Gowdy's monologue last night on Fox News, recounting a story and tying it together with his wife, who apparently is an educator, and what's happening in cities like Chicago right now.
I want you to keep this dichotomy in your mind. The image of a young boy walking to school for hours, getting in the car with a stranger because he understood the power of education to change his life. And now contrast that with the image of those dancing teachers in Chicago. That child knew the power of education and being in school. I wish the teachers in Chicago knew as much as he did.
That's powerful. And he's right. He's right. 800-655-Mike. Let's get your reaction. Here's the Chicago Mayor, Lori Lightfoot, begging the Chicago teachers, please go back to work.
And as the expression goes, the proof is in the pudding. CPS had 3 weeks of successful implementation of these mitigation plans in our schools. That was until the CTU blew up that success and created chaos that we are now enduring. And also remember, the CPS staff and principals have been in our schools throughout this pandemic, feeding our kids, getting them ready for the return of students, and continuing the hard work every single day. And
what
by
are the
the way,
Chicago teachers doing?
There are teachers.
They're making dancing videos. They're by themselves on Zoom dancing and...
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
Seemingly misrepresenting where she was and what she was doing during the Capitol tragedy. For what reason, I'm not exactly sure.
I don't know, so deeply rattled. I'm still processing the end of my life when I come out. And I come out, and this man is a Capitol Police officer. There was no partner, was not yelling, Capitol Police, etc., etc. But then it didn't feel right. Because he was looking at me with a tremendous amount of anger and hostility.
So this was a Capitol Police officer that was trying to help her. And she immediately said that he was looking at me with a lot of anger and hostility. Let's go to cut 36, where the story gets even more complicated. Cut 36.
I talked to G, my legislative director, after the fact, and he said, no, I didn't know if he was there to help us or hurt us either. And G was actually like, this man came with so much hostility that that G was sizing him up and didn't know if he was going to have to fight him. So like so many other communities in this country, like just that presence doesn't necessarily give you a clear signal if you're safe or not.
I want to reinforce what she just said there. That's a Capitol Hill police officer. that was there to help you, AOC, and you had to size him up?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
Welcome back, America. So many millions of American children are nowhere near schoolyards because of the selfishness of teachers' unions, represented by the Chicago Teachers Union, which entered into an agreement not to go back to school last night. Now, they're trying to pretend that they've agreed to go back to school. It's fake news, completely fake news. They've agreed that sometime immediately pre-Ks will go back, however many there are, and special ed students, which is great. We'll hear about K through 8 subsequent when it's safe, according to their secret plan, and no high school kids are going back. So it's a complete and utter sham. We also heard from Jen Psaki yesterday what the Biden plan metric is. If we can play Jen Psaki telling you what Team Biden considers success when it comes to reopening schools.
Sure. His goal that he set is to have the majority of schools, so more than 50%, open by day 100 of his presidency. And that means some teaching in classrooms. So at least one day a week. Hopefully it's more. And obviously it is as much as is safe in each school and local district.
When you say some teaching, you didn't use the same majority qualifier there. You just have to have some teaching in school, some teachers in school, not the majority of teachers in school and the majority of classrooms.
Well, teaching at least one day a week in the majority of schools by day 100.
Okay, and that's
so there. If you think that's a goal, that's not a goal. We're already there because Texas and Florida and some districts everywhere are teaching. It's Chicago and LA and other big districts like New York that are not teaching, that are turning their back on students. And this should be a lesson to everyone. You can't trust a teachers union. And you ought to fire every single school board member. Never vote for another incumbent school board member again. It is utterly insane what has happened to our children over the course of a year, and it will go on into the summer. They will have been without school in most cases for a year and a half if they even get back next August. And it's because of the existing leadership and the existing teachers unions. Do not leave your children in public schools. Serious, go start a homeschool. Go to the Barney Charter School Initiative at Hillsdale College will help you stand up a charter school, or go to your local Catholic school. I'm a graduate of 12 years of Catholic education. Call up your local Blessed Sacrament, St. Mary's, Christ our King, St. James, Mount Carmel, St. Stephen's, St. Rose. I just named all the Catholic schools that were in my my little town, our little basketball league. I think I didn't forget anyone. If I forgot anyone, they were no good. St. Pius X, I suppose I have to include them. That was my first school. So go call them up and say, you've got a kid, you want him in. What's it cost? Negotiate. They've got an empty desk, they'll give you a deal. It's a marginal income for them when they get down to full enrollment and they still have an empty desk. Make them a deal. Call them up and get it done. Because your kids do not deserve another year of torture on the computer or laptop. Unless you are superhuman, you cannot get that done. That's why we have schools. That's why we have always had schools. And so the public schools are no longer schools, those that are not teaching. They are retirement plans for teachers with elementary and high schools attached to them. That's what they've become. GM, before its bankruptcy, became a retirement benefits company, made cars. And now schools have become teacher union benefit companies that occasionally allow children to come to the schools. Get out of them. Let me do a market update. 1-800-520-1234. Give me a call. 1-800-520-1234. Market update brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. 888-888-1172. Refinance your house today. These interest rates are not going to stick around, not with another $2 trillion of money coming down the pike. Made up money means inflation. Get a new house, move up, refinance, buy an investment house, get money out of non-producing investments and put it into dirt, or help your children get into a house by becoming a non-occupying co-borrower. Andrew and Todd.com or with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They will get it done for you. Or simply call 888-888-1172. The Dow was down 9 points yesterday. The NASDAQ was up 20. The S&P was off 4. Overseas today, Japan was up a little bit. Hong Kong was up a lot. And it's mixed in England and Germany. Who knows where we'll be by the end of the day. But at $1.9 trillion is going to put a lot more money into the market. That's all I got to tell you. People are saving it. They're not spending it. And they're certainly not giving it to schools this year. Stay tuned, America.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by the Association of Mature American Citizens, AMAC.
This is Albert Mohler for townhall.com. The American experiment is founded upon a presupposition, a prior commitment to an ordered liberty, an established order. That means policies. It means a covenant. In our case, it means a constitution. As of right now, the U.S. Constitution is the longest surviving written constitution in human history. It's a remarkable document. All of that came to the fore in violent events that interrupted the joint session of Congress to count the votes of the Electoral College. At the end of the day, our constitutional order proved itself once again resilient. But that doesn't take away any of the tragedy and the horror of what took place. It was an enormous stress test on ordered liberty, a stress test brought on by the President of the United States.
We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved.
It's an opportunity for the right, the left, conservatives, liberals, all Americans to repudiate political violence and reaffirm, once again, our commitment to ordered liberty. It's the American way. I'm Albert Mohler.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
What else should people who are just waking up to the threat of whatever you want to call it, wokeism, critical theory, what else should they read? And then on top of that, James, if you really want to do something about it beyond, I don't know how we're going to begin to break up the mafia that is the schools of education, what can general listeners and viewers do, in your opinion?
Okay, so, I mean, I don't mean to shill for myself. It's not usually my style. But I created the website New Discourses to try to make something that people can read. It's not to say that there's nothing out there. There are other books. Mike Gonzalez's book, The Plot to Change America, is not bad. I've read that. Rod Dreher's book, Live Not by Lies, I think is important, especially to the second part of your question, where I'm going to mention Solzhenitsyn here in a second, as it is, for what the average person can do. But I do encourage people to go read New Discourses. I think I've published close to 500,000 words in the last year, most of which I wrote myself, to try to get information out about this. So you can see how, I know it's a little bit heady, it's a little bit scholarly. You're right about Breitbart. Breitbart read these guys and is extremely good at breaking it down in a way that's more digestible than, I'm a little scholarly past that. You may want to read... is it Martin Gurri? Gurri is certainly the last name, Gurri, Revolt of the Public, for example, to see the role that the internet plays, these social networks play in what's happening now. It's a different kind of attack. It's not going to explain to you the nature of this side of the problem. It's going to...
Institution for townhall.com. The Biden administration announced in their first week that the U.S. is rejoining the World Health Organization. But the WHO is a flawed group, one that has performed poorly while the world has struggled with COVID-19. Early on, the group was far too deferential to China, even parroting Beijing's early claim that the virus could not be transmitted between humans. Since then, an independent panel concluded that the WHO dithered in its response, waiting too long to declare an international emergency. All the while, the WHO has continued to block Taiwan's participation because of political objections from the Chinese government, despite the fact that the world has much to learn from Taiwan's exceptional response to the virus. Before rejoining the WHO, we should have demanded some accountability and reform from the group for the $400 million in taxpayer dollars we send to it each year. It looks like we'll keep on writing blank checks to the WHO, which they are more than happy to keep cashing. I'm Lan Hee Chen.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
How can they do what they do to the Republicans, and Republicans cannot do anything to them? They have been cited many times of, I'm going to take Trump out tonight. I'm going to take him out and beat the hell out of it. Why? It doesn't make any sense. They can prosecute them, but they can't be prosecuted. You know what I'm saying?
Of course I know what you're saying. We've been talking about it all week. You've got Chuck Schumer outside the Supreme Court, all but threatening Gorsuch and Kavanaugh. You've got Maxine Waters saying, gather around Trump cabinet members, let them know they're not welcome anywhere anymore. Yeah, we've played that whole montage of Democrats talking about fight, fight, fight. Eric Swalwell had a relationship with a Chinese spy. He hasn't lost his committee positions on the Intel Committee. Ilhan Omar hasn't lost her committee assignments. Jews have brainwashed the world. Jewish lawmakers have dual loyalties. Hasn't lost any committee assignments. Chuck Schumer's 1974 racist scheme to get rid of black people out of an area in Flatbush. What's that? You didn't know about it? I've done a video about it. Go on YouTube. I've written about it. A guy named Jay.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. You know, we had such a record turnout this year, 80 million voters for Joe Biden, 75 million voters for Donald Trump. Do you know that 90,000 votes total would have made D.C. all Republican controlled, the Senate, the House, and the presidency? 90,000 votes total. It is genuinely a 50-50 country. And Republicans don't feel that way because, of course, there's a sham impeachment going on and $1.9 trillion that's about to be spent on a partisan vote. But it really is. It's very easy to retake it all and to do it very carefully and to do it constructively by supporting smart things and opposing stupid things and calling out Democrat excess wherever it occurs. And it's occurring with schools now when it is perfectly safe to go back to school. School teachers are being vaccinated, and they are still not going back to teach. And that tells you everything you need to know about teachers' union and public education. You have to abandon it. You've got to leave for the sake of your children. Not only is it being politicized at every level, it's becoming thought control, PC, woke school all over the place, but it's not even open. It's woke school over the internet, which is bad woke school, and it's badly done to begin with. And they've completely abandoned your kids. That's Joe Biden's America. That's the teachers' union's America. That's the public employee union America. That's the America by 90,000 votes total. Don't get mad. Organize. Don't let the crazies take over your party. Make it mainstream Republican, big tent party, exclude the crazies. Don't need them, don't want them. Don't want the 800 people who invaded Congress. Don't want them running our party. Don't want them at all. They're citizens. They deserve their free speech rights. They ought to go to jail if they went inside the Congress. It's pretty easy to do this distinction. We don't want the crazies. We want the Congress. Buy votes, and we need 90,000 more votes to get the presidency and the Congress back within 4 years, and that time will fly by. I'm going to talk with a historian, Andrew Roberts, after the break about all of his fine books. It'll be part of my new podcast, The Interview. But primarily, I'm going to talk to him about what's a historian think about President Trump and President Biden and the election we just had. I think we are in a period of time very similar to a period of time about which Andrew Roberts is an expert. The mid-Victorian years, from Lord Palmerston through Lord Salisbury. And I believe it's the end of the Victorian years. And I believe that close division of power then is what we have now. And it's going to be a long period of time before one party or the other dominates the United States. We're making up our mind. And one of the things that's going to help you make up your mind, if you have children or grandchildren, is the fact that public employee unions are utterly indifferent to your children. And the schools are closed when they should be open. Jerry in Washington State. Good morning, Jerry.
Good morning, Hugh. Hey, there's only one way to handle this whole thing, and that's to shut their money off. Just shut their money off, and they'll be back to work in a week. And that's
but that's really not happening because the teachers' unions control the school boards.
Well, that's the problem. Once you get the school board in line, like you said, don't vote another one of them in.
I agree, but in the meantime, take your children out and go find a private school or start a homeschool co-op with 10 other parents and take it 1 out of 10 days, have 10 kids at your house. Or if you've got 3 kids, you do 3 out of 10 days. It's not that hard to do. The America was settled that way.
You know, we're right in the center of the state here. Richland, Washington has a Catholic school, and I would go down there on business, not to the school but to the hospital. But anyway, went to the by the school, and I noticed it was open all the time. So the kids were out there in the playground, and so I said, I called one of the teachers over, and I said, what's with this? Are you guys always on? We were shut down 1 week. 1 week they were shut down. And she said, other than that, if anybody gets sick, which have had very, very little, they quarantine that person.
Well, yeah, it could be done. It could be done. I got to go, Jerry. Thank you. I want to talk to Daryl in California. Hi, Daryl.
Good morning, sir. I wanted to back up everything that you and Bobby Charles are saying to please make a plea to all the other listeners out there that are not in California. It's already happened here, the federal bill that he was talking about, and I've been calling it the Calamo, sort of the California version of the Alamo. And we need to be careful not to let it happen to the rest of the nation because we've pretty much lost our voice. The conservatives here, it's almost like we don't matter anymore.
Well, that might change. I just saw David Drucker, who is our friend at the Washington Examiner, tweeted out. I had to point this out to Dwayne, that Drucker has reported that nearly 10% of the California recall signatures submitted have been submitted by Democrats. Almost 25% of those petitions have been submitted by independents and 66.5% by Republicans. GOP organizers say 85% of petitions are valid, putting them on track to submit probably by March 1 the more than 1.5 million signatures needed to force Gavin Newsom into a 21 recall election. And so the Republicans in California may be down, but they are not out. And all they have to do is figure out who they want to be their standard bearer. And I think some Democrats are going to get in. They're going to realize that Governor Newsom is toast, and they're not going to let the brass ring go by because they realize that they're not going to ever get a Senate seat back. Alex Padilla's got that Senate seat forever. The next Senate seat's going to go to Adam Schiff, and that's why he's doing this joke of an impeachment again. So I'd tell you, it's just not over. Not over. Let me go to Brody in Texas. Hi, Brody.
Hey, Hugh, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Hey, I'm a former school administrator down here in Texas, and you're right. Texas has been open. Our schools have been open. Athletic events have been happening. Spread is not occurring in our school districts, and I'm waiting to see if Joe Biden runs on what he said he was running on, following the science. CDC says schools are safe. Let's reopen the state. Let's reopen the country.
Did you hear Jen Psaki? Were you in the car when I played the president's press secretary?
I was. Majority is a pretty loose word when you start splitting hairs on what you call majority.
Oh my gosh, they've already met it. It's Texas and Florida will meet it.
It's unfortunate. A lot of times, Republican states carry the entire country. I think we're doing it in her statistics she used.
But if you are a parent in a closed school district, should you, in your opinion, as an educator, Brody, get your kid out of that district?
Absolutely, Mike. We did it. We're in a private school south of Abilene, Texas. It's a hybrid. They go to school 3 days a week. They homeschool twice a week, and it's a great model. And I would encourage every parent in the public school system to take a look at doing something similar.
Don't you think it's going to collapse? I believe public education is going to collapse. They have so failed America and children.
Absolutely. And, in Texas, we have great school systems. However, the homeschool, the co-ops, the private schools, the Christian schools, they're growing. They're growing rapidly.
And Texas is one of the places that has not gone crazy when it comes to curriculum, but it's still better to control your children's life by having good people teach them good things in a good environment and be serious about education. And we now know. Now, some people in Chicago are saying, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Get together with some neighbors, find a Catholic school, find a Christian school, find a homeschool co-op, something like you're talking about, Brody. There are alternatives. And that's why if the Democrats are going to spend $1.9 trillion, spend it on children so that they will get some money to get out of these districts. Thank you, Brody. Ricardo in Tennessee. Hey, Ricardo.
Hey, buenos dias, Hugh. Thanks for letting me in.
You're welcome.
Hey, you actually took over the spot that Scotty Campbell had in the morning, and he is now our state representative and doing a great job.
Well, maybe I'll come down to Tennessee and run for governor then.
That's right. But, hey, you're a great fill-in, so keep up the good work. And
fill in? I'm not leaving. I got my claws into you now. I got people calling, Ricardo. Where do you live? Which city?
I live in Kingsport, Tennessee, in the Tri-Cities area.
You betcha. I love my Tri-Cities callers. I get a lot of them. I think it must be a hot radio market.
Oh, it is. And, as far as it goes, I don't want to sound like Charlie Sheen, but we got Scotty in Congress and you on the radio, so that's winning.
Winning,
But,
yes, it is. I used to have a producer who would hit the winning button when people would say that, but he's asleep now.
Sleep at the wheel. I got you.
Yeah.
Kind of like Biden, and that's what I wanted to talk about.
Please go ahead.
With opening the border and letting everybody in without testing them, and then bringing the refugees in from the Middle East and not testing them, I feel pretty safe calling this the super spreader administration.
Well, they are definitely they are super spreading because they are not going to control the border. And by the way, did you notice we picked up a dozen Iranians in Yuma last week?
Exactly. And and guess where they're going to send them, Hugh? Right to East Tennessee, I bet you.
Oh, well, I don't know.
This place up.
I think if they are IRGC, I haven't seen the intelligence reports yet, but they won't be coming anywhere if they're bad guys. I don't know where resettlement is right now, but if they're crossing the border at ports of entry, they ought to be being shown the door immediately, unless they have a legitimate. There are some Iranians who have a legitimate fear that Khamenei will kill them if they get back. And if they're those people, we ought to find a place for them. But they will have sponsor families. If they're legit.
But let's test them.
Oh, absolutely.
I understand we have to help refugees, and, we bring immigrants in over 1 million a year. But let's make sure they're all tested. Is that too much to ask as a concerned citizen of the United States?
No, it's not. And you would think that in $1.9 trillion, there would be plenty of money to do that.
Winning.
You would there, you heard it. Did you hear that?
Winning.
Someone woke up.
Hey, real quick sidebar with you. I'm the 1.9 trillion. One of my good friends is up in Chicago, and he's a liberal, of course. And he's a state employee, and their pension fund is wiped out, and a lot of this money is going to that. And that's another bone pick, but that's enough. I've used my time up. I know the people. I got to go. You have a great day. Adios.
Ricardo, thank you. And I will repeat for everyone for clarity's sake. 1.9 trillion is going to be spent. We can do nothing about that. Therefore, the Republicans in Congress should work to get some of that money spent on good things rather than all of that money spent on bad things. One of the worst things is money to refund public pension funds, which have been writing checks they cannot cash for decades in places like California, and they have unfunded pension liabilities in California and Illinois and Connecticut that are simply astronomical. And they need the money, and they want the money. That should not go there. Give it on the per-child basis back to families. That's good, and give it to defense. Before I go to the next segment with Andrew Roberts, let me remind you that you want relieffactor.com. Relieffactor.com. $19.95. Great sponsor of the program. I take it in the first hour. I remind you about it this time and in the second hour at the same time, so that if you're going out the door and you're listening, and I have never suggested this before, but you might want to keep relieffactor.com in your car. Some of you are like me. You loathe commuting because it just does bad things to your back and legs. So I'll tell you what, keep that Relief Factor in the car, and that will remind you to take it every single morning. That is my suggestion for the day. $19.95, 3-week starter pack. Go and get it, and then come right back here, or go especially to my YouTube channel right now, Hugh Hewitt at YouTube, because Andrew Roberts, historian of all, comes up next on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
This is now a playbook. The secret history of the shadow campaign that saved the 2020 election. This is not something where they just are going to disassemble this. This is how they're going to do it from this point forward. So what are the big takeaways? Number one, the left is just now realizing how much power they really have over us. I think they're still learning how to use that power. Number two, the left is willing at almost all costs to sacrifice truth for power. Number three, persuasion means very little when the other side is actually concerned of how the election is going to be conducted. You know, we joked around throughout the the first couple weeks after early November, after the election. We said it doesn't matter how people vote; it matters who counts the votes. Remember, we joked about that. Well, they say here in Podhorser's presentations, winning the vote was only the first step to winning the election. After that came winning the count. Winning the count. Can you believe it? Not just what people think, but actually how the votes are counted. Winning the certification, winning the Electoral College, and winning the transition. This is now going to be how they will handle every single election from this point forward.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Albert Mohler for townhall.com. The American experiment is founded upon a presupposition, a prior commitment to an ordered liberty, an established order. That means policies. It means a covenant. In our case, it means a constitution. As of right now, the U.S. Constitution is the longest surviving written constitution in human history. It's a remarkable document. All of that came to the fore in violent events that interrupted the joint session of Congress to count the votes of the Electoral College. At the end of the day, our constitutional order proved itself once again resilient. But that doesn't take away any of the tragedy and the horror of what took place. It was an enormous stress test on ordered liberty, a stress test brought on by the President of the United States.
We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved.
It's an opportunity for the right, the left, conservatives, liberals, all Americans to repudiate political violence and reaffirm, once again, our commitment to ordered liberty. It's the American way. I'm Albert Mohler.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
I think the Lincoln Project is specifically a smear campaign to break down what we might call Trumpism, I think could be better called MAGA, Make America Great Again. If you want to, I know it's your show, so if you want to call it America First, I suppose
MAGA's
that's okay
fine.
too.
MAGA's fine.
MAGA, I think, is probably most appropriate though, which is.
Welcome back. I am Hugh Hewitt. This is the new segment of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome to the interview. Today I am talking with Professor Andrew Roberts, often a guest over the 20 years of this show. He is a famous historian. He's an Englishman, lives in London, graduate of Cambridge. He's written so many great books that we've talked about over the years, but it's been a few years since I last talked to Professor Roberts. Welcome back, Professor Roberts. Great to have you.
Thank you very much indeed, Hugh. It's great to be on the show.
Now, I have to tell the backstory of why you came to my attention. I have to write a column for the Post, Washington Post, once a week, and I wanted to write about the party politics as they are in the United States right now. And I remembered back in the book Salisbury, Victorian Titan, the first Andrew Roberts book that I read 21 years ago, there was a quote that Lord Palmerston said about Salisbury being always on the attack. I went and I found it. I put it in the column and it ran. And then I began to reread this book, which I'm holding up for the benefit of those who are watching on YouTube, Salisbury. And I thought to myself, I have not talked to Andrew Roberts in a long time. How have you been?
You must be very strong being able to hold up that book. I think it's about 900 pages long, wasn't it?
It is a terrific reread after 20 years, by the way. It has endured well. I guess that's what happens when you write when everything is at your... You were the official historian of Lord Salisbury, were you not?
I was, yes. 3 of them had died before me, and so I was... in a way, quite lucky to even get the opportunity in my mid-20s to write the official biography of a prime minister.
3 times a prime minister, and maybe the greatest of the 19th century prime ministers. Do you have an opinion on that, by the way, between Gladstone, Disraeli, and him?
I do, actually, yes. I think that if you, as Salisbury did, bring your country to the greatest level of prestige and power that it's ever had, and the largest empire that the world's ever seen, I think you can look both Disraeli and Gladstone in the face, frankly.
Okay, we'll come back to that. I also want to let people know that you are the author most recently of Churchill, Walking with Destiny, which is now regarded by most Churchill students as the single greatest single-volume history of the great man, including Dr. Larry Arnn, who is a part of the official historian team of the Churchill legacy, beginning with Lord Randolph Churchill, then through Martin Gilbert and to Larry and beyond. So you must still be going everywhere and selling Churchill Walking with Destiny wherever you go.
Well, sadly, of course, not in the last year, but I have got plans to come back to the United States as soon as Britons are allowed back there to speak at 3 or 4 more places. So, yes, it's been wonderful. I think I've gone to 28 states of the United States with the Churchill book, and it's one of those fascinating things about Churchill that he's, I think, even more popular in America than he is in Britain.
And this book was widely regarded as sort of the definitive. What made it different from all the other ones, in your opinion, Andrew?
Oh, well, I was very fortunate to have a huge sort of avalanche of sources that came out at the same time that I signed the contract. Her Majesty the Queen allowed me to be the first Churchill biographer to use her father's diaries.
Oh, my.
So I was very fortunate to be able to use King George VI's diaries, wartime diaries, and he met Churchill every Tuesday of the Second World War and was told all the secrets of the government by Churchill. They got on extremely well, so that was very helpful. And also there were 51 new sets of papers that were deposited at Churchill College Archives in Cambridge, which were a great help, as you can imagine.
Professor Roberts, this is a tangent, but that's what happens in a podcast as well as a radio interview. Did the king know about the Luftwaffe raids, of which Churchill was aware, but which he did not speak for fear of revealing the intelligence apparatus that had been set up to intercept German signals?
Yes, he knew about the ultra decrypts that we got as a result of the Enigma machine, but he also knew about the nuclear secrets. You know, Churchill told him which admirals and generals and ministers were going to be hired and fired, which countries were going to be invaded, when and under what circumstances. There was nothing that Churchill hid from the king.
Now, you know, the American public now is under the impression that every prime minister has a relationship with their sovereign as those are depicted in The Crown. Is that true?
Please do not believe a single thing that you see in The Crown. It's an absolute travesty of the truth. It's written by a man called Peter Morgan, who's very anti-royalist, And apart from Her Majesty the Queen, everybody comes out badly from being on the Crown. And the show about Winston Churchill being responsible for killing thousands of people in the London smog is complete rubbish from beginning to end. So please don't take the Crown as history.
Well, when Margaret Thatcher was done in by the series, I began to sour on it, and especially when they skipped over the fact that she emerged from a bombing resolute and with her face turned against terrorism, and they left that out. I thought to myself, this is truly a left-wing project.
It really is, and it has been from the beginning, actually. And a friend of mine, Hugo Vickers, a great expert on the royal family, in the first series, he wrote a little pamphlet delineating no fewer than 1,000 factual errors in the first series alone. He's since bumped that up to I think 3,000 errors over the 5 series. So frankly, you really cannot take anything it says at all as being anything more than light entertainment.
So, Professor Roberts, before I go, I've got like 5 questions I must ask you. But I have to first ask, everyone has been impacted by the pandemic differently. It has barely